When I was about 12 years old, some of my friends and I decided to pick up chess, and I was pretty good at that time, beating them pretty much every day with no effort, until one of my friends got tired and decided to look up easy ways to win, and lo and behold, he found the scholar's mate. The next day, he came up to me and just beat me in 4 moves. I didn't know what to do at the time, but now I do, and I know that if you play the scholar's mate every single game, you're only gonna get so far. But it made me wonder at that time, can I abuse a set of openings that are just like the scholar's mate at every single elo until I get to high elo? The answer obviously is no, but I will try my best to come up with the scholar's mate equivalent of every single elo. Disclaimer, this is from my own experience, so maybe you will find that the Stafford Gambit gets played at 600, but that is not what I experienced when I started chess. Let's start with something even lower than the scholar's mate. I know this is surprising, but some of you might already be familiar with this opening, even though I don't really want to call it an opening because it's more like 2 blunders made in a row by your opponent. You should never ever hope to win a game with this opening. It's more so to trick family members who never played chess before. So let's say you play e4 and they decide to play the Borg. They probably don't know this is the Borg, but that's what they're playing. And this, if you look at the eval bar, is already very much favored for white. And the best move against the Borg is actually knight c3. But because they didn't know what they were doing, they're just making moves randomly. If they choose to play either f6 or f5, they get mated instantly. And this might make you look like a genius for winning in 3 moves, but this should not be something you should hope to achieve in a game. I've gotten this, by the way, a total of 1 singular time. I think I was around 800 elo, and it was the biggest hope chess moment ever of my life. I played d4 for those of you that don't know, and my opponent played g5, and I just had a hint that they didn't know what they were doing. So I played e3, which I never play in a real game, in hopes that they would blunder mate in 1. And well, they did, but that's my only ever fool's mate victory ever. Most of you probably already know what the scholar's mate is, so I won't be explaining it, but I will tell you instead how to defend against it. So let's say white start with e4, e5, the classic, and then they play queen h5. A lot of beginners, this is where they panic, and they know that the scholar's mate is coming, but they fail to defend against it properly. You need to understand that the scholar's mate requires 3 moves before any threats are made. Right now, there is no checkmate threat whatsoever, but there is a threat on your e5 pawn. If you play knight f6, kicking away the queen because you are familiar with that move when they play queen f3, you will lose the game after queen takes e5. So you have to defend this pawn. Some of people like playing d6. I personally think knight c6 is the best move because you actually get to develop a knight at the same time as defending the pawn. And then of course, since they're playing the scholar's mate, they're gonna commit to it. And here is where the threat starts, after 3 moves. Before that, you don't have to worry about checkmates, but after 3 moves, you have to worry about it. There's only 1 move here that I think should be considered. Yes, there's the queen e7, but I don't think queen e7 should ever be played because there's just such a better move in g6. Why is g6 so good? The reason g6 is so good is because this move usually costs black quite a bit. This is not a move that you get out very easily. The intention of g6 is to play bishop g7, fianchettoing the dark square bishop. This costs a lot for black, usually. There's an entire opening called the King's Indian Defense where they achieve this structure at the cost of the entire center. But because this structure is pretty strong, they get to reclaim the center later on. But in this opening, because he played the scholar's mate, you get to play g6 on tempo, essentially fianchettoing your bishop for free, and you don't lose the center at all. I know what you're saying. There's probably a million videos out there detailing traps against the scholar's mate to win against it more crushingly, but I don't think they're worth learning because you're not going to be facing this opening at all at some point in your chess career. And to me, it just wasn't worth learning, especially because this setup is more than enough for you to win against a weaker player. Before we move on, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I don't really like asking for it, but it does make a big difference and it would really help me out a ton. I also have a Discord server that you guys can join and talk to me. It will be linked in the description below. But for now, let's get back to it. Ben Feingold has some very strong opinions on where the fried liver attack actually starts, saying that this position is the only position that should be considered the fried liver attack. But I know most of you are probably considering this move the fried liver attack, even though this is not yet the fried liver attack apparently. But for the sake of this video, I will only be talking about this, because this position is what you will see every single E4 game between 800 and 1200. I had a friend who told me when I asked him what opening he played, he told me he would try the fried liver attack every game, whether he was white or black. And I would say this is where some players get really confident they can beat unsuspecting players. I had a coworker who played chess and he told me that he could win against me with a lot of confidence. And mind you, at that time I was like 1100. I wasn't a very good player. So I didn't know what he was up to. I didn't know what opening trap he was going to try. And this is what he tried. But instead of playing knight f6, I played bishop c5 and he just didn't know what to do anymore. He couldn't play knight g5 because he would lose the knight. And he just lost. There was nothing he could do. He just one-tricked this specific opening and really had a lot of confidence that he could win against me. By the way, if you hate the fried liver, I highly recommend playing bishop c5. This, I will show later on, falls to another set of very annoying moves, but for now, you just completely avoid the entire trickiness behind the fried liver attack. And to me, these tactical openings are always at your disadvantage when your opponent is playing them, because they're probably playing 10,000 games of these openings and you're only seeing this every like 50, 100 games maybe. So you are at a disadvantage right off the bat because you definitely have less experience than them, and playing into their hand is just disastrous. This opening might not coincide with your experience, but it was around my ELO range when I decided to learn this line because I absolutely hated the Spanish. So of course, this trap starts with a Lopez, and I remember not understanding how this doesn't just win my e5 pawn if I don't play d6. I remember thinking, okay, if I play knight f6, then I will just lose this pawn because they will simply trade the bishop and then win my pawn for free. And I never understood how to deal with this until I looked it up, and it's just queen d4. You just win the game with this. And of course, the second I learned about this, everyone stops taking my knight. So then I decided, okay, it's time to learn something new. The following move is actually what I still play to this day, but it's very rare I actually get this entire trap down. So a6, bishop a4. Now in this position, I don't really play d6 that often anymore, but sometimes when I'm feeling it, I still play d6. And the trap starts if they play d4. But instead of taking the pawn directly, we're going to play b5 first, freeing our knight from the pin and adding an attacker onto the d4 pawn, which allows us to actually capture it. Now, this is where white can make the mistake of recapturing with the knight. You can see the eval bar going all the way to black's favor, because after trading the knights, we get c5, attacking the queen and threatening to trap the bishop. Now, let's say he plays queen c3, we get to completely trap the bishop and win a piece for a pawn in the opening as black, which is huge. This should win you the game. Do be careful that if instead of queen c3 they don't give up and they play queen d5, you cannot play c4 right now because you would just lose the rook. Here you just have a very comfortable move, bishop e6, attacking the queen and defending your rook and still threatening c4. I saw this trap in a very clickbaity YouTube thumbnail about crushing the Spanish, and I hated the Spanish at that time. But ever since like 1500, I stopped playing e6 in favor of knight f6 because simply no one plays d4 anymore. I'll show one more opening in the 1500 range. This, I will admit, I've only fallen for this a grand total of once because I changed my entire opening afterwards to never fall for it ever again. That's how bad I felt after losing to this. It starts off with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then white plays the Italian, but at that time, I didn't play bishop c5 yet. I played d6 because I was still trying to fianchetto my dark square bishop. And here is where you can make the mistake. After white plays knight c3, because this bishop looks very strong and it looks very enticing to go pin this knight, bishop g4 was just a very natural move for me. But after h3, if you try to keep this pin by playing bishop h5, this is where you can fall for this trap. This is the original, oh no, my queen. Mind you, I was still a unsuspecting 1500. I was not scared. So after white plays the brilliant move knight e5, I just saw this queen and I thought, wow, what a blunder. What a terrible blunder. He blundered his knight and his queen at the same time. So I took instantly with absolutely no realization that what was about to happen to me. Because this, if you don't know, is mate in 2, forced. And again, this is why I play bishop c5 now. But again, this is not foolproof either. Okay, I will talk a bit more about the England because this is an opening that I saw every other game at some point. I'll be a bit careful about what I say because last time I said that this was a free win for me, and that upset some people in my Discord server that played the England Gambit. But I'll be honest, my goal is not to annoy you guys, but genuinely, I have not lost against this for like 200 elos. Like, there was like from 1600 all the way to 1800, I think I have not lost to this more than once. And after 1800, I just stopped seeing it because people started playing the Budapest instead. I'll go over two variations, both of which has white accepting the gambit, because I think accepting the gambit is genuinely the only way to go. The other moves just aren't comfortable, and accepting the gambit usually wins you the game. The first line we're going to cover is the knowledge check line. This is where if you know what to do, you straight up just win. And if you don't know what to do, you actually just lose. So let's say white accepts the gambit. Now black wants to attack this pawn with knight c6. This is very common. Pretty much everyone will play this if they're going for this line. The most natural response is knight f3. And then, well, black will continue with this idea. They will continue attacking the pawn. And here, most people will play bishop f4. Bishop f4 is very natural. But this is where some people will panic, because after queen b4 check, the most natural play is to save the bishop as well. Because if you block with the knight, you just lose your bishop. And after blocking with the bishop, a lot of players kind of choke here after queen takes b2. This is the first of many knowledge checks. Like, look at the lines the engine suggests. There's only one line that wins the game and every other line just loses the game. And if you don't know the move, well, you're in big trouble. And if you want to find it, it's going to take you a lot of time and your opponent is definitely prepared. So I'll just tell you right now, just memorize this. It is knight c3. From here, there are two branches, I would say, that most of the players will play. It will be either knight b4 or bishop b4. Lower elo players will play knight b4, and as you go up in elos, they will start playing bishop b4, and eventually they will just stop playing this opening because they realize that it doesn't work. I cannot do it justice by discussing both of these branches in detail. I really recommend to just pull up the engine, look up each of the moves that your opponent could be playing, and just memorize this. Only if you play d4. If you don't play d4, this is completely useless unless you want to play the England Gambit. But if you do play d4, I highly recommend learning this, because eventually you will literally see this every other game. And if you don't know what to do, you will just lose. I gained an insurmountable amount of elo once I just decided to sit down and learn this opening. So I highly recommend it. So instead, I'm going to show you what happens if you don't pass the very first knowledge check. Because most of the time, when people fall for this opening, this is where they realize that this opening is very annoying. So let's say you don't pass the first knowledge check, and you decide to very, very foolishly play bishop c3. Now you look at the eval bar, and it's literally telling you, okay, you messed up big time, even though this looks like a perfectly fine move. Actually, this is the first time I saw this opening. This is what I played, and then after that, I decided to sit down and start learning it because I decided not to lose to this ever again. The move black has here is bishop b4. Now, suddenly white is completely lost. There's nothing you can do anymore. Your bishop is pinned, so you cannot capture the queen. The queen is attacking your rook, so you cannot move this bishop away. And if you capture this bishop, the knight comes in, and now suddenly c2 is attacked with you having no real way of defending it, and your rook is also attacked. You will lose this game. It is fine. Just learn this opening from now on. Stop losing to this. I mentioned at the beginning that there are two variations, the first one being the knowledge check variation. There is also what I like to call the trap variation, where black literally just tries one trick that you can very easily fall for. And this is every single time now. If I see the England, which I don't anymore, it's usually this variation. No one really plays knight c6. People usually play d6. And, well, after capturing, this is where the trap variation begins. I'll guide you through how black usually plays this and what ideas white has, which leads them into this deadly trap that I've fallen for a total of once. So naturally, we want to develop. We kind of avoid knight f3 because of bishop g4, and that just looks very annoying. So I tend to play knight c3 first. Here, black has a lot of options, but the most common move I see is knight c6. And now here, well, you develop one knight. Now it's time to develop the other, but we will see. It doesn't really matter which knight you develop first. They will probably play this very annoying bishop g4 idea that I talked about. Now, if you don't play e3, then your pawns will double after he captures. So people usually play e3. This is actually what I play. The engine doesn't like it, but I think e3 just makes a lot of sense. Now black will try to castle queenside because that's where the trap lays. We're going to see how that works. But to castle queenside, you have to get the queen out of the way. The easiest square, the safest square, and the least intimidating square. Because if your opponent is playing very safely, like queen e7, queen e7 is actually the top engine move. If he plays queen e7, this looks very unthreatening and you kind of off guard, right? Like if you were to play a more aggressive queen move, then you would kind of be more wary and play a bit safer. But here, we are very annoyed with this bishop. A very common idea to kick it out is to play bishop e2. This is very standard. And here, black will play the trap. So it's, I say it's a trap, but it's actually the top engine move. If you long castle, there's a very, very big idea that if you miss, you will just lose the game. This is why I actually don't like this variation a lot, because it's very uncomfortable for white to play. It's just really juicy to castle. It just looks amazing, right? Like every piece has been developed in order for you to castle, but you will see that if you castle, you just lose the game. Because after this check, if you capture the bishop, you lose your queen, and that is not worth it. Look at the eval bar, it's saying that black is completely won here. There are quite a few moves that you can actually play here. The main one, I think this is very comfortable. It's knight d4. This just looks amazing. This is like, if I had to pick a move to play here, this is actually what I play nowadays against this. Yes, I see this every other... I know we're like a million moves into the opening. This looks like the middle game, but I swear to God, I have reached this exact position more times than you can imagine. So this is why I say, if you play d4, it is absolutely crucial that you learn this entire opening. I know most of you probably pick d4 over e4 because e4 has just so many more variations you have to learn. But d4 still has some homework to do. You still have some memorization. This is one of the main ones, I would say. I said that this is from my experience, and I'm a d4 player, so there's going to be quite a few d4 openings in this video. This is the second one. After the absolute hell that was the England Gambit Fiesta of 16 to 1800, now it's been replaced by an opening I genuinely hate a million times more, which is the Budapest. So it starts with knight f6. Usually when I see knight f6, I prepare myself for a King's Indian game, and I actually really like the King's Indian. I think it's a very elegant opening. But anyways, so against a King's Indian, most people will play c4, and here, every time my opponent plays e5, I'm just annoyed beyond belief because now I'm just ready to get Budapest Gambited. I will show the main idea that I fell for once again, exactly once, and then I decided to learn this entire opening because I got mated in such a devious way. I did not ever want to lose like that ever again. So You know me, I always accept gambits. I think accepting gambits is far more interesting than denying them. So I accepted the gambit. Now this line will happen pretty much every game if you accept the Budapest. Knight g4 will happen. They will try to attack your pawn. Now here you have two choices. You can play bishop f4 or knight f3. I like developing knights before bishops, so I play knight f3 usually, but it doesn't really matter. The order they will transpose. Knight c6 to continue attacking the pawn. If you play the Budapest, you will know that this pawn is completely lost. There's nothing you can do to get it back. You're not gonna have this +1 pawn advantage for very long. But you can try. So bishop f4. This is what I choose to play. Just continuing to annoy black a little bit, and it's developing on tempo, so it's not too bad. Here, black has a very, very comfortable move, developing the bishop with check and preparing to castle. So they will probably play bishop b4 check. Here you have a few ways to block. Knight c3 is not very fun because you will end up doubling your pawns, which is why I usually tend to go for knight d2. It's just a more elegant option. But this is where, like, I didn't realize I played exactly into their hand. This is exactly the moves that black wants me to play. I know the engine says that it's even, but this is exactly what my opponent wants me to play every time. Instead of castling, they will set a much more tricky move. It's also the top engine move. Queen e7. This looks like it doesn't do much. Again, following the idea that when you play passively, your opponent doesn't suspect anything. When I saw queen e7, I just thought, okay, well, my opponent played nothing, so I'm just gonna play something a bit more aggressive. When I first fell for this trap, an idea that caught my eye was a3, because I saw that if the bishop retreats, I can play b4, and after he retreats again, I can play c5, and then it's trapped. This is a very common idea. I see this quite a bit in lower elos. So when I first saw this, I thought a3 was an amazing move, so I decided to play a3. And I was prepared to have a bishop trade and for that to be over. But to my surprise, my opponent took on e5. And look at the engine. It's actually completely even. This is basically all theory at this point. But if you're not careful and you take the bishop on b4, you get mated in the most devious, the most devilish way I've ever seen in knight d3 checkmate, with the pawn being pinned by the queen and your king smothered by your own pieces. The reason why I think this is so strong, this Budapest Gambit idea is so powerful, is because as you saw when I went through the line, black never put himself in a position that was worse. In the Scholar's Mate, you actually just make your position worse in hopes that your opponent falls for a trick. There's no such thing here. They just played the best engine moves, and if white gets knowledge checked and takes this bishop after knight e5, then they lose. This is why I absolutely hate the Budapest. I get no reward for learning this line. Now it's just game is just even. In the England and the Scholar's Mate, both of these, if you learn lines to counter them, you get an advantage out of it. Here, I avoided the trap. To avoid the trap, by the way, you just take the knight. It's very simple. But I don't get any advantage. I just learned this entire line, and my opponent, it's still theory. They probably played this line a million times more than me, and I'm about to just lose this game. So throughout the video, I always explain that in this position, I really like bishop c5. I think this is the Italian. This is the gioco piano, and after c3, it becomes a gioco pianissimo. It's one of my favorite openings. It's one of the more challenging openings to play, with not too many tricks, so the better player will usually come out ahead. But I said that this move here was not foolproof whatsoever. And this is where a sweat drips down my forehead every time my opponent plays this. I sit up in my chair and I prepare for what's about to happen to me. Every time they play this, I pretty much lose. It is the move b4. I will admit it's not something that I've seen recently only. I have seen b4 plenty of times when I was under 1500. But I suspect that these players, they saw the video by Hikaru and Levi Rosman about the best openings for beginners, where they put this opening at the very top. And I just don't understand how they did this, because this is not easy to play. White has a lot of pressure, but if they don't know how to apply it, black is just up 1 pawn. So I always thought that it was complete bait. I was never pressured by this, was never challenged by this. I would just be up 1 pawn for the game every time I saw Evans Gambit. Until recently. I can't believe I used to hope for my opponent to play b4, and now I dread this. I hate the Evans Gambit. Every time they play it, I tend to lose the game. So, you know me, I always accept gambits. So I will accept the gambit. Here, there's pretty much one good move. Sometimes they will castle, but more often than not, they will play c3. So I'm a big fan of Ben Feingold, and if you watch a few of his lessons, he will repeat constantly to always retreat, especially once you get an advantage. So now I'm up a pawn, so I decided, okay, I'm just going to play very, very safe. I'm going to retreat all the way to e7 here, because I thought that that was the most solid line. But I'll show you a line that happened to me, and it made me stop playing bishop e7 completely. So after white plays d4, this pawn is terrible anyways, and I'm not interested in defending it, so I just decide to capture. White here can play queen b3. Queen b3 will be an idea whether you play bishop e7 or not. This is the Evans Gambit special, I would say, where they line up the queen and the bishop on the weakest pawn. And here you can make a mistake and defend it with knight h6. In hindsight, I don't know how this move came to my mind, because this obviously does not work. Because after knight h6 and bishop takes h6, you are simply losing. There's nothing you can do anymore. After you take the bishop, now suddenly you have derps, double isolated rook pawns. This is terrible. You basically just lost 2 pawns. This is how I see this nowadays. If you have derps, you just lost 2 pawns. But the suffering doesn't end here, because after bishop checks, you have one legal move. And here, they play bishop h5, and I know the eval bar doesn't say that this is terrible, but this is terrible. This is so difficult for black and so easy for white. I don't know. I just look at this, I get depressed, and I resign. Like, by the way, the only move here is d5, but according to the engine, this is playable for black. It's slightly white favored. You're up a pawn, so the fact that it's favored for white is already pretty annoying. But I'm a big proponent that the engine saying that it's even or even-ish is irrelevant to players, because this position, anyone would pick white. Anyone. Even if you weren't familiar with the eval bar, you would pick white here instantly. Even if black is up a pawn, because this is just so comfortable to play for white. They don't have any possible mistakes, and black has one good move for like the next 5 moves. So it's precisely for this reason that I decided to stop playing bishop e7 and to instead opt for the much more solid bishop a5. Last but not least, the Eric Rosen special, the Stafford Gambit. And I think Eric Rosen single-handedly nerfed this opening so much by popularizing it. Like, no one's falling for this stuff anymore. And by the way, this is the opening that inspired me to make this video, because when I saw the Stafford Gambit series by Eric Rosen, I decided that this looked very, very OP, and I wanted to try it in my games, but I wasn't anywhere near his elo. And people in my elo just didn't take my pawn. So if you don't know what how the Stafford Gambit starts, it's e4, e5, and then it's the Petrov defense. And in this position, good players will take the pawn, because they understand that this is actually very free. It's not bad to take the pawn. But newer players, they don't know what you're gonna do. They're kind of scared. I would be scared for sure to take the pawn. It just looks like a big trap. So while Eric Rosen was basically demolishing grandmaster players with his opening, I wasn't even able to get it against my 1500-ish opponents. He has an entire Lichess study, which I will link in the description, that will do this opening much better justice than I could ever hope to. But I will show 2 lines, because these are the 2 most famous lines, and I think they're very, very easy to fall for. So let's say white does take the pawn. The Stafford Gambit is knight c6. Here, white doesn't really have a reason not to take the knight. He will double your pawns and take your knight with tempo, so there's really no reason not to. And it's also the top engine move. So after knight takes, here Usually we tend to capture towards the center, but in the Stafford Gambit, that's not our plan. Our plan is to open up our position so that we can attack white as fast as possible. So we will capture with d takes c6. If white plays d3, a very common idea in the Stafford is actually play bishop c5, attacking the very weak pawn. You will see that a lot of the trappy openings and tricky scholars mate ideas always tend to look at the f2 or the f7 pawn. This opening is no different. You will be abusing the weakness of this pawn. If white makes the mistake of playing bishop g5, which is a very comfortable move, in my opinion, when I'm up material, I really enjoy pinning the knight to the queen or the king, because this guarantees a trade of pieces, and as we all know, trading pieces is very good when you're ahead. So this blunder by white is not uncommon whatsoever. And the reason it's a blunder is because you can actually completely ignore the pin and go for knight takes e4, which looks completely losing. You're losing a knight and a queen. But if white decides to take your queen, you get checkmate in 2 in the form of knight takes f2 check and bishop g4 checkmate. I'll show one more line, but really, I encourage you guys, if you guys want to play the Stafford Gambit, to go check out Eric Rosen's lesson on Lichess. It is far more detailed, and you will learn the complete opening instead of a few lines. But I'm trying to convince you to try these, even though you will never get to this position in lower elos. No one will capture your pawn, no one will capture your knight. Well, half of them will not play e4, and it will be a disaster. In this position, before they were playing d3, the idea is to defend the undefended pawn, of course. But instead of playing d3, a lot of players will choose to play knight c3 instead, developing a knight and defending the pawn. Again, we're going to be abusing the very weak f2 pawn with bishop c5. This is, again, it's the same idea in the Stafford. And now, white, if they don't know what the Stafford is, the very natural move here is actually bishop c4. I think bishop c4 looks amazing, especially if they play the Italian. This will be exactly like the Italian. It looks very natural, but this move completely loses the game because they do not realize that black has a lot of pressure. Even though the position looks very calm, this is by no means a calm position. So black continues with their idea of attacking the weak f2 pawn with knight g4. Now, this, you will probably see this quite often in the fried liver ideas, where castling actually gets you completely out of it, because now suddenly your rook is defending it and your king is defending it. And you should know by now that 2 minor pieces for a rook and a pawn, even though they are the same in material, they are not in the same in value, and you should not trade 2 minor pieces for a rook and a pawn. But you probably already saw the eval bar that this is not a very good move because of queen h4, and now there is simply way too much pressure for white to handle. There's no good way to defend against this anymore. The only move that doesn't completely lose you the game instantly is h3. Every other move is very unnatural and just loses you the game faster, I would say. But you probably guessed it, black is already won. There's kind of nothing white can do anymore. The move here is knight takes f2. Now, you could lose the exchange, but you will probably still lose the game anyways. And if you're not familiar with the Stafford, you probably will try to win, even though you are completely lost at this point. You don't really want to allow the knight to discover check your king. So the move you will probably try is king h2, but that doesn't work. As you can see, now it's mate in 5 because of a very nice carousel idea with black. With bishop d6 check, you have a few options here, but I will only look at one because this is already completely over. Your king kind of wants to retreat. Playing g3 looks terrible after the queen takes it, so you will probably try king g1. But after knight takes h3 check and the pawn taking on h3, this is the mate that most of you can probably find. After queen g3, king h1, you have mate. And this line is actually what made me want to play the Stafford. It was not the oh no, my queen line. But as you can tell, I didn't get a single game of it. I tried it maybe 30 games. In half of them, I was white, so I didn't get to play the Stafford. And when I was black, a good chunk of them were d4. And when they were playing e4, they were not just simply not capture on e5, and at some point I just got bored and I just decided to go back to my old opening repertoire. This concludes this video. Again, this is from my own experience, and because I'm a d4 player, this is very, very skewed towards d4 openings. But I try to include as many e4 traps in there as I can, but they're usually for black because I'm the one playing them. If you have any openings that you saw a lot of times during a certain elo range, please let me know in the comments. I really want to make more of these because I think memorizing openings and looking at these traps is unironically really enjoyable for me. So if you have a very fun trap that worked for a certain elo range and then stopped working completely, please let me know in the comments. And in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it.